Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining me today. What I'm about to share with you is the most painful story I've ever had to tell. It's about love, sacrifice, betrayal, and the devastating moment when the child you gave everything for chooses someone else's lies over your lifetime of truth. My name is Linda, and I'm 52 years old. For the past 29 years, I've been a single mother to my son, David. His father walked out on us when David was just 6 months old, leaving me with nothing but a baby, a pile of bills, and a determination that my son would never feel abandoned again. I remember that first night alone with David after his father left. I was 23, barely more than a child myself, holding this tiny human who depended on me for everything. I made a promise that night, whispering it into his soft baby hair as he slept on my chest. I will never let you down, baby boy. Mommy will always be here for you. And I kept that promise. Oh, how I kept that promise. I worked 3 jobs to make ends meet. In the mornings, I was a receptionist at a dental office. In the afternoons, I cleaned houses for wealthy families in the suburbs. And on weekends, I waited tables at a local restaurant. David came with me everywhere he could. I'll never forget the sight of him doing his homework in the restaurant booth while I served customers, or playing quietly with his toys in the corner of houses I cleaned. The other mothers at his school had husbands, nice cars, and plenty of money for school trips and fancy clothes. But David never complained. When he was 8 years old and wanted to join the soccer team, I sold my grandmother's wedding ring to pay for the registration fees and equipment. When he was in high school and dreamed of going to college, I took out loans I'm still paying off today. Every sacrifice felt worth it when I saw his smile. Every sleepless night working extra hours was justified when he brought home good grades. Every birthday party I missed, every social event I skipped to work extra shifts, every personal dream I put aside, it all made sense because I was building something beautiful. I was raising a good man. David was my world, and I thought I was his. We had our own little traditions. Pancakes every Sunday morning, movie nights every Friday where he got to pick the film, and long talks about everything and nothing while I helped him with homework. He used to tell me I was his best friend, his hero, the strongest person he knew. "Mom," he said to me on his 16th birthday, "when I grow up, I want to take care of you the way you've taken care of me. You deserve the world." Those words sustained me through every difficult moment. They gave meaning to every sacrifice. High school was wonderful for David. He excelled academically, played on the basketball team, and had a close group of friends who often came to our small apartment. I loved hearing their laughter fill our home, even when they ate everything in our refrigerator and left a mess in the living room. David's friends adored me. They called me Mama Linda, and often stayed for dinner, especially Marcus, whose own home life was troubled. I became a second mother to several of his friends, and David was so proud of that. "My mom is the coolest," he would tell them. "She's been everything to me. Mom, dad, best friend, coach, cheerleader. I don't know how she does it all." College was our next big challenge. David was accepted to a state university 3 hours away, and while I was incredibly proud, my heart broke a little. Our daily conversations, our shared meals, our easy companionship, all of that would change. I drove him to college in my old Honda Civic, the trunk packed with everything we could afford to buy for his dorm room. As we unpacked his things, I tried not to cry. This was what I had worked for: his independence, his future, his success. "I'm going to miss you so much, Mom," he said as I prepared to leave. "I'm going to miss you too, baby. But I'm so proud of you. Call me every day, okay?" And he did. Every single day for the first 2 years of college, David called me. We talked about his classes, his friends, his dreams for the future. He came home every other weekend, and during those visits, it felt like nothing had changed. We still made pancakes on Sunday mornings, still watched movies together, still talked for hours about everything and nothing. Those were some of the happiest years of my life. I was finally seeing the fruits of all my labor. My son was thriving, becoming the incredible man I always knew he could be, and our relationship was stronger than ever. David graduated with honors and got a good job at a marketing firm in the city. He moved into a nice apartment and started building his career. I was so proud I could barely contain myself. All those years of struggle, all those sacrifices, they had led to this moment. "None of this would have been possible without you, Mom," he told me at his graduation. "Everything good in my life exists because of your love and sacrifice." I will never forget that. I believed him. Why wouldn't I? For 24 years, we had been a team. For 24 years, it had been David and me against the world. I had no reason to think that would ever change. But then she appeared. Her name was Jessica, and David met her at a company networking event. She was 26, beautiful, well-educated, and came from what David described as a really good family. Her father was a successful lawyer, her mother was a doctor, and she had grown up in the kind of privileged environment I had always dreamed of providing for David. When David first told me about Jessica, I was thrilled. My son was 25 and had never had a serious girlfriend. He'd dated casually in college, but he'd always been so focused on his studies and his future that relationships took a back seat. "Tell me about her," I said excitedly during one of our phone calls. "She's amazing." "Mom, she's smart, funny, beautiful. She works in finance and has this incredible apartment downtown. And her family, they're the kind of people who summer in the Hamptons and winter in Aspen." I should have heard the warning in those words, but I didn't. I was just happy that my son had found someone who made him happy. "I can't wait to meet her," I told him. "Actually, that's what I wanted to talk to you about. Jessica wants to meet you too. Maybe we could all have dinner this weekend." I spent the entire week preparing for that dinner. I cleaned my apartment until it sparkled, bought new placemats and candles, and planned a menu of David's favorite foods. I wanted Jessica to see how much I loved my son, how happy our little family was. When David walked through my door with Jessica that Friday evening, I was struck by how beautiful she was. Tall, blonde, impeccably dressed in clothes that probably cost more than my monthly rent. But it was her smile that caught my attention. Perfect, bright, but somehow not quite reaching her eyes. "Mrs. Patterson," she said, extending a manicured hand. "It's so wonderful to finally meet you. David talks about you constantly." "Please call me Linda," I said, taking her hand. "And the pleasure is all mine." Come in, come in." "David, show Jessica around while I finish up dinner." The apartment tour didn't take long. We're talking about a modest 2-bedroom place where David and I had lived since he was 10. But as I listened to them from the kitchen, I heard something in Jessica's voice that made me uneasy. "This is cozy," she said. And something about the way she said cozy felt like a criticism. Dinner started well enough. I had made David's favorite pot roast, mashed potatoes, and green beans. Jessica ate politely but sparingly, mentioning that she usually ate more clean foods. I asked her about her work, her family, her interests, trying to get to know the woman who had captured my son's heart. But as the evening progressed, I began to notice things. The way Jessica's eyes swept around my modest apartment with barely concealed judgment. The way she subtly corrected David when he shared stories about our life together, particularly the parts about our financial struggles. When David told her about the time I worked double shifts for 3 months to pay for his class trip to Washington, D.C., Jessica interrupted with, "Oh, how difficult that must have been for you, David. Having your mother make such a big deal about finances." David looked confused. "It wasn't a big deal, Jess. Mom was just doing what she always did, making sure I didn't miss out on anything." "Of course," Jessica said with that same perfect smile. "It's just that some parents can be a bit dramatic about their sacrifices." The word dramatic hit me like a slap. I had never thought of my sacrifices as dramatic. They were just love in action. After that first dinner, David's calls became less frequent. Instead of every day, he called every few days. Instead of long conversations about everything in his life, our talks became shorter, more surface level. When I asked him about it, he assured me that everything was fine. "I'm just busy with work and spending time with Jessica. You understand, right, Mom?" I did understand. Of course I did. My son was in love, and that was a beautiful thing. I had always known that someday he would find someone special and that our relationship would naturally change. I just hadn't expected it to feel so abrupt. David and Jessica had been dating for about 6 months when I started noticing more significant changes in my son. The easy warmth in his voice when he talked to me began to fade. Our Sunday phone calls became Wednesday phone calls, then became whenever he remembered phone calls. More troubling were the subtle changes in how he talked about our past. Stories that had always been sources of pride, how we overcame challenges together, how close we were, how much we meant to each other, began to sound different when he told them. Jessica thinks it might not have been healthy for us to be so dependent on each other, he said one day. Completely out of the blue. Dependent? I asked, confused. David, we were a family. We took care of each other. I know, Mom, but Jessica has a point. She says that most single mothers don't make their sons their whole world the way you did with me. The words felt like a physical blow. You were my world because you were my child, and I loved you. That's what mothers do. But maybe that wasn't fair to either of us, David continued, and I could hear Jessica's voice in his words. Maybe we both missed out on having more normal relationships because we were so wrapped up in each other. Normal relationships? I thought about all the times David had told me how grateful he was for our close bond, how proud he was to have me as his mother, how lucky he felt to have grown up with so much love. David, where is this coming from? You've never felt this way before. I'm just growing up, Mom. I'm starting to see things differently. But I knew it wasn't David's growing up that was changing his perspective. It was Jessica's influence, subtle but constant, reframing our beautiful relationship as something unhealthy, abnormal, even damaging. The visits home became less frequent, too. David used to come see me every other weekend, but now it was once a month, then every few months. And when he did visit, Jessica usually came with him, which changed the entire dynamic of our time together. I tried to include Jessica, I really did. I asked about her work, her family, her interests. I complimented her clothes, her hair, her accomplishments. But no matter what I did, I felt like she was studying me, cataloging my flaws, building a case against me in my son's mind. It wasn't until later that I realized how calculated Jessica's campaign against me really was. She never said anything directly critical about me in front of David. She was too smart for that. Instead, she used a more insidious approach. She planted seeds of doubt and let them grow. David, don't you think it's a little unusual that your mother calls you so often? She would say, most of my friends' parents give them more space. Isn't it interesting how your mother always has some crisis or emergency when we make plans? She would observe after I called David because my car had broken down. I've noticed your mother talks a lot about money and all the things she did for you. My parents helped me too, but they don't constantly remind me of it. Each comment was small, seemingly innocent, but together they created a narrative that I was needy, manipulative, and emotionally unhealthy, that our close relationship wasn't beautiful. It was problematic. Jessica was particularly good at reframing my expressions of love as attempts at control. When I worried about David working too many hours, Jessica told him I was being controlling. When I wanted to help him financially during a rough patch, she said I was enabling his dependence. When I called to check on him when he was sick, she said I was not respecting his boundaries. Slowly but surely, Jessica convinced my son that the woman who had loved him unconditionally for 25 years was actually the source of his problems. The breaking point came during Thanksgiving of their second year together. I had invited David and Jessica to my apartment for our traditional Thanksgiving dinner, just the three of us, like we'd done the year before. But this time, something was different. David seemed distant throughout the meal, answering my questions with short responses and avoiding eye contact. Jessica, meanwhile, was perfectly polite but kept making subtle comments about family traditions and how different families do things differently. After dinner, as I was cleaning up, I overheard Jessica talking to David in the living room. "Baby, I know this is hard, but you have to see how unhealthy this dynamic is," she was saying. You're 27 years old, and your mother still expects you to spend every holiday with her. Still calls you multiple times a week. Still acts like you're her boyfriend instead of her son. Jessica, that's not fair, David said, but his voice lacked conviction. Isn't it? When was the last time you made a major decision without consulting her? When was the last time you went more than a few days without talking to her? David, this isn't normal. This isn't what a healthy mother-son relationship looks like. I stood frozen in my kitchen, dishes dripping in my hands, listening to this woman systematically dismantle 27 years of love. My parents love me just as much as your mother loves you, Jessica continued. But they understand that part of loving your child is letting them go. Your mother hasn't let you go. She's kept you emotionally dependent on her, and it's affecting your ability to have adult relationships. But we've always been close, David said weakly. There's a difference between being close and being enmeshed, Jessica replied. And David, you have to decide what kind of life you want. Do you want to be a grown man with a wife and family of your own? Or do you want to spend the rest of your life being your mother's emotional husband? Emotional husband. The phrase made me feel sick. That night, after they left, I called my sister Karen and told her what I had heard. Linda, she said gently, I've been worried about this. I've seen how Jessica looks at you, how she acts around you. She sees you as competition. Competition for what? I'm his mother. Exactly, and she wants to be the most important woman in his life. She can't be that as long as you and David have the relationship you've always had. But our relationship is beautiful. Karen, it's built on love and respect and 27 years of shared experiences. I know that, and you know that. But Jessica is making David see it differently. She's convincing him that your love is actually selfishness, that your closeness is actually unhealthy. I didn't want to believe it, but the evidence was becoming impossible to ignore. 6 months after that terrible Thanksgiving, David called to tell me that he and Jessica were engaged. I should have been thrilled. My son was happy and in love, planning to build a life with someone he cared about. But instead, I felt a deep sense of dread. That's wonderful, sweetheart, I managed to say. When did this happen? Last weekend. We went to that little bed and breakfast upstate where we had our first getaway, and I proposed during dinner. How romantic. I'm so happy for you both. But even as I said the words, I noticed that David's voice lacked the excitement I would have expected from a newly engaged man. He sounded almost resigned. We're thinking about a fall wedding, he continued. Something small and elegant. Jessica's parents are helping us plan it. Jessica's parents. Not me. Not the woman who had raised him and sacrificed everything for his happiness. I'd love to help however I can, I offered. Actually, Mom, that's something I wanted to talk to you about. Jessica thinks it might be better if her mother takes the lead on wedding planning. You know, since she has more experience with these kinds of events. More experience with these kinds of events. Translation, more money and social connections. Of course, I said, swallowing my hurt. Whatever makes Jessica happy. Over the next several months, I watched from the sidelines as Jessica and her mother planned my son's wedding. I was occasionally consulted on minor details, what color I would wear, whether I had any dietary restrictions for the reception, but I was essentially a guest at my own son's wedding rather than a participant in this major milestone of his life. The morning of the wedding, as I was getting ready in my modest hotel room, David called me. Hi. Mom. I just wanted to check in before the ceremony. Hi, sweetheart. How are you feeling? Are you nervous? A little. Mom, I want you to know that I love you, and I'm grateful for everything you've done for me. Something in his tone made my stomach clench. David, you're scaring me. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong exactly. It's just, Jessica and I have been talking about our future, about what we want our marriage to look like. Okay. And we think that for our marriage to be healthy, we need to establish some boundaries with our families. Boundaries. There was that word again. What kind of boundaries, David? Well, Jessica feels like I've relied on you too much in the past, and she's probably right. So we've decided that after we're married, I'm going to try to be more independent. What does that mean, exactly? It means I won't be calling as often, and I won't be visiting as much. Jessica thinks it's important for me to focus on building my new family now. I felt like someone had punched me in the stomach. David, I am your family. I will always be your family. I know, Mom, but you have to understand. Jessica is my wife now. She has to come first. I'm not asking to come first, David. I'm just asking not to be pushed out of your life entirely. You're not being pushed out. We're just recalibrating. Jessica says this is what healthy families do. Jessica says. Those two words had become the soundtrack of my heartbreak. The wedding was beautiful. I'll give Jessica that. Held at her family's country club, with flowers that probably cost more than I made in 3 months, and a guest list full of people I didn't recognize. I sat in the third row, not the front row where the mother of the groom traditionally sits, but the third row, behind Jessica's extended family. As I watched my son promise to love and cherish Jessica for the rest of his life, I should have felt joy. Instead, I felt like I was watching him slip away from me forever. During the reception, I barely spoke to David. He was busy with photos, with greeting guests, with his new in-laws. When I did manage to catch his attention, our conversations were brief and felt forced. You look so handsome. I told him during one brief moment alone. Thanks. Mom, I'm glad you're here. But he wasn't looking at me when he said it. He was scanning the room, looking for Jessica, already more connected to his new life than to the woman who had given him everything. The final blow came during the mother-son dance. It's supposed to be a special moment, a chance for the groom to honor his mother and everything she's done for him. David had chosen our song, You'll Be in My Heart by Phil Collins, the same song I used to sing to him when he was little. As we danced, I whispered, I love you so much. David, I'm so proud of the man you've become. I love you too. Mom, he replied, but his words felt hollow. Obligatory. Promise me we'll still be close, I said, unable to help myself. Promise me that getting married won't change everything between us. David was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Mom, things have to change. I'm a married man now. I have to put my wife first. I understand that, sweetheart. I just don't want to lose you. You're not losing me, but you have to let me grow up. Let him grow up. As if loving him and staying close to him meant I was keeping him as a child. After the song ended, David hugged me briefly and then returned to Jessica's side. I watched them together, beautiful, happy, starting their new life, and I felt like a stranger at my own son's wedding. The changes started immediately after the honeymoon. David's calls went from weekly to bi-weekly to monthly. Our conversations, which used to last for hours, became 15-minute check-ins filled with superficial updates about work and weather. When I tried to maintain our old closeness, I was met with resistance. Mom, you called me 3 times this week, David said during one conversation. Jessica thinks that might be a little excessive. Excessive? David, we used to talk every day. That was before I was married. Things are different now. Different how? I'm still your mother. I know, but Jessica is my wife. She needs to know that she's my priority. I never said she wasn't your priority. I just want to maintain our relationship. And we will have a relationship. Just a different kind of relationship. But what David meant by different became clear over the following months. Our relationship became formal, distant, superficial. Gone were the easy conversations about his dreams and fears. Gone were the shared jokes and memories. Gone was the warmth and intimacy that had defined our bond for 28 years. When I tried to visit, there were always excuses. David was busy with work. Jessica was planning something. They had plans with her family. The spontaneous visits that had once been welcomed were now boundary violations. Mom, you can't just show up without calling first. David told me after I surprised him with his favorite homemade cookies on a particularly stressful week at work. Jessica and I need to plan our weekends. I was just trying to cheer you up. You sounded so stressed on the phone. I appreciate that, but we're adults now. We need advance notice for visits. I started making appointments to see my own son. Appointments. For the boy I had rocked to. Sleep every night for the first 5 years of his life. The holidays were especially painful. David and Jessica established a new tradition of alternating holidays between families, which meant I saw my son every other Christmas, every other Thanksgiving. And when he did come to my apartment, Jessica came too, sitting stiffly on my couch and checking her phone while David and I tried to recreate some semblance of our old closeness. About a year into David and Jessica's marriage, I started noticing that David was telling different versions of our family history. Stories that had once been sources of pride were now told with embarrassment or resentment. The story about me working 3 jobs to support us became, my mom was always working. So I basically raised myself. The story about me selling my grandmother's ring to pay for his soccer equipment became, my mom was always dramatic about money. The story about our close relationship became, my mom was overprotective and didn't give me enough independence. When David's friend Marcus got married and thanked his single mother in his wedding speech for all her sacrifices, David told me later, I always felt bad for Marcus. His mom was just like you. She made everything about her struggles. David, that's not what I did. I never made anything about my struggles. I just loved you and took care of you. Maybe that's how you remember it, Mom. But Jessica has helped me see that there were some unhealthy patterns in our relationship. Jessica has helped me see. Translation. Jessica has convinced me to rewrite our entire history. The most devastating rewriting came during a family gathering at Karen's house. David and Jessica were there, along with my other relatives, and somehow the conversation turned to childhood memories. Remember when David was 8 and he broke his arm? Karen said, laughing. Linda slept in that uncomfortable hospital chair for 3 days straight because she didn't want him to wake up alone. I smiled at the memory. It had been one of the scariest times of my life, seeing my little boy in pain, but I had been so grateful that I could be there for him. Actually, David said, and something in his tone made everyone look at him. That's a perfect example of what Jessica and I have been talking about. Mom, you didn't need to sleep at the hospital for 3 days. The nurses were perfectly capable of taking care of me. The room fell silent. Karen looked shocked. I felt like I'd been slapped. David, I said quietly, you begged me not to leave. You cried every time I tried to go home. I was 8 years old, Mom. Of course I was scared. But a healthy parent would have helped me learn to cope with that fear instead of just giving in to it. Jessica nodded approvingly. Exactly. Sometimes the most loving thing a parent can do is help their child develop resilience instead of just rescuing them from every difficult situation. I excused myself and went to Karen's bathroom, where I cried quietly for 10 minutes. When I came back, the conversation had moved on, but the damage was done. My son had just publicly rewritten one of my most treasured memories of motherhood, turning my love into a character flaw. The end came on a rainy Tuesday afternoon in March, exactly 2 years after David and Jessica's wedding. David called and asked if he could come over to talk. Something in his voice told me this wasn't going to be a pleasant conversation. He arrived alone, which surprised me. For the past year, Jessica had accompanied him to every visit, every phone call, every interaction we had. Seeing him without her felt both hopeful and ominous. Hi, Mom, he said, settling onto my couch with the stiffness of a stranger. Hi, sweetheart. Can I get you some coffee? I just made a fresh pot. No, thanks. I can't stay long. I sat across from him, studying his face. He looked tired, stressed, older than his 29 years. But there was something else in his expression, a hardness I had never seen before. David, what's wrong? You sounded upset on the phone. Mom, Jessica, and I have been doing a lot of work with her therapist about family dynamics and healthy boundaries. Her therapist. Not their therapist. Her therapist. Okay. And we've come to some realizations about our relationship that I need to share with you. My heart started pounding. What kind of realizations? David took a deep breath. Mom, I think our relationship has been unhealthy for a long time. I think you've been emotionally dependent on me in ways that weren't fair to either of us. David, where is this coming from? We've always had a wonderful relationship. That's just it, Mom. What we called wonderful was actually codependent. You made me your emotional partner instead of just your son. The words felt like physical blows. That's not true, David. I loved you. I supported you. I gave you everything I had. And that's the problem. You gave me everything you had instead of building a life of your own. You made me responsible for your happiness. I never made you responsible for my happiness. Didn't you? Mom, every decision I made, I had to consider how it would affect you. Every relationship I tried to have, you found ways to interfere with. Every step toward independence I took, you made me feel guilty about. I stared at my son in shock. This wasn't my David talking. This was Jessica's words coming out of my son's mouth. David, that's not how it happened. We made decisions together because we were a team. I supported your relationships. I welcomed Jessica into our family. And I never made you feel guilty for being independent. Mom, you called me crying when I got my first apartment because you said the house felt empty without me. I was sad that you were moving out. That's normal for a mother. You made me feel responsible for your sadness. That's not normal, Mom. That's manipulation. Manipulation. My love for my son was being called manipulation. David, I don't know what Jessica has told you, but this isn't about Jessica, David exploded, standing up from the couch. This is about you, Mom. This is about the fact that you can't accept that I'm a grown man with a wife and a life of my own. I do accept that. I've never tried to interfere with your marriage. Haven't you? Mom, you call constantly. You show up uninvited. You compete with Jessica for my attention. You make everything about yourself and your feelings. Each accusation felt like a knife to my heart. David, that's not fair. I call because I love you. I visit because I miss you. I care about your feelings because you're my son. But you don't respect my boundaries. You don't respect my marriage. You act like Jessica is the problem, but Mom, you're the problem. The words hung in the air between us. My son, my beautiful, beloved son, had just told me that I was the problem. David, I whispered, how can you say that to me? After everything we've been through together, after everything I've done for you, how can you stand there and tell me that I'm the problem? Because it's true, Mom. And until you can acknowledge that and get help for your codependency issues, I think we need to take a break from our relationship. A break from our relationship. My son was breaking up with me. What does that mean exactly? It means no more phone calls unless there's an emergency. No more visits unless they're planned weeks in advance and approved by both Jessica and me. No more guilt trips, no more manipulation, no more making your emotional needs my responsibility. I felt like I was drowning. David, please. You're all I have. You're my whole world. And that's exactly the problem, Mom. I can't be your whole world. It's not fair to me, and it's not healthy for you. I looked at my son, this man I had raised from a baby, this person I had loved more than my own life, and I saw a stranger. Jessica had succeeded. She had turned my son against me so completely that he could stand in my living room and accuse me of manipulation and codependency for the crime of loving him too much. Is this what you really want, David? To cut me out of your life? I want you to get help, Mom. I want you to build a life that doesn't revolve around me. And when you can do that, maybe we can have a healthier relationship. And if I can't? If I can't become the person Jessica thinks I should be? David was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, then I guess we won't have a relationship at all. He left without saying goodbye. I sat on my couch for hours after he was gone, staring at the door he had walked out of, trying to understand how 29 years of love had led to this moment. That was 8 months ago. David kept his word. There have been no phone calls, no visits, No contact at all, except for a brief, formal text on my birthday that said, "Happy birthday, Mom. Hope you're well." I've had a lot of time to think about what happened, to examine my own behavior and consider whether there was any truth in David's accusations. I've gone to therapy myself, trying to understand if I really was as unhealthy and manipulative as Jessica convinced him I was. My therapist, Dr. Martinez, has helped me see that while no relationship is perfect, my love for David was genuine and healthy. Yes, we were close. Yes, I was deeply involved in his life. But that's not codependency. That's motherhood. Linda, Dr. Martinez told me during one of our sessions, what you're describing is a single mother who sacrificed everything for her child and maintained a close, loving relationship with him as he grew up. There's nothing pathological about that. But Jessica says I made him my emotional partner, that I was too dependent on him. From what you've told me, it sounds like Jessica saw your close relationship as a threat to her control over David. She systematically convinced him that your love was actually dysfunction. But what if she's right? What if I was too involved, too needy? Linda, ask yourself this. Did you ever try to sabotage David's relationships? Did you ever try to control his career choices? Did you ever threaten to hurt yourself if he didn't do what you wanted? No, never. Did you support his independence even when it hurt you? Did you celebrate his successes even when they took him further away from you? Did you put his needs before your own consistently throughout his life? Yes, always. Then you weren't codependent, Linda. You were a loving mother who was gradually poisoned against by someone who saw you as competition. But understanding what happened doesn't make it hurt less. I still wake up every morning thinking about calling David. I still see things that remind me of him and want to share them. I still feel the absence of his voice, his laughter, his presence in my life like a physical pain. The hardest part is knowing that somewhere out there, my son believes terrible things about me that aren't true. He believes I manipulated him, controlled him, damaged him. He believes our beautiful relationship was actually toxic, and he believes these things because the woman he loves convinced him they were true. I've tried to understand Jessica's motivations, to see things from her perspective. Maybe she genuinely believed that David and I were too close. Maybe she really thought she was helping him by encouraging him to distance himself from me. But I can't escape the feeling that her campaign against me was calculated and cruel. She saw a threat in our relationship and systematically dismantled it. She used David's love for her as a weapon against his love for me. She convinced him that he had to choose between being a good husband and being a good son, and she made sure he chose her. The cruelest part is how she rewrote our history. Every sacrifice I made out of love became evidence of my dysfunction. Every moment of closeness became proof of my manipulation. Every expression of my feelings became an example of my selfishness. David now believes that I worked 3 jobs not because I loved him and wanted to provide for him, but because I was dramatic about money. He believes that I supported his dreams not because I wanted him to succeed, but because I wanted to control his choices. He believes that I stayed close to him not because I treasured our relationship, but because I was codependent. The truth is that I was a single mother who loved her son with everything she had. I made mistakes, certainly, all parents do. But my love was real, my sacrifices were genuine, and our relationship was beautiful. Jessica convinced David otherwise, and that may be the greatest tragedy of this entire situation. I think about the David I raised, the boy who used to tell me I was his hero, who promised to take care of me when he grew up, who said I was the strongest person he knew. That David still exists somewhere, inside the man who told me I was the problem. But Jessica has buried him so deep under layers of guilt and revision that I don't know if I'll ever see him again. Friends tell me that someday, David will realize what he's lost. They say that when he and Jessica have children, he'll remember what real parental love looks like. They say that life has a way of teaching us hard lessons about who really matters. Maybe they're right. Maybe someday David will wake up and remember the mother who loved him unconditionally for 29 years. Maybe he'll realize that love isn't manipulation, that closeness isn't codependency, that sacrifice isn't selfishness. But maybe he won't. Maybe Jessica's version of our story will become his permanent truth. Maybe he'll spend the rest of his life believing that the woman who gave him everything was actually the source of his problems. You're listening to this story, and you recognize yourself in it. If you're a mother whose child has been turned against you, if you've been called manipulative for loving too much, if you've watched someone systematically poison your relationship with your child, I want you to know that you're not alone. Society often tells us that we should be grateful when our children find love, even if that love comes at the cost of our relationship with them. We're told that letting go is the highest form of parental love, even when that letting go means accepting lies about who we are and what we've done. But I'm here to tell you that your love matters. Your sacrifices were real. Your relationship with your child was valuable, even if someone has convinced them otherwise. To the partners who see loving parents as competition, children don't have finite amounts of love to give. Loving their parents doesn't diminish their love for you. A man who loves his mother deeply is more likely to love his wife deeply, not less. A woman who has a strong relationship with her father is more likely to choose a partner who treats her well. When you systematically destroy your partner's relationship with their family, you don't win more love, you just create pain. You don't build a stronger marriage. You build a marriage on the foundation of loss and lies. And to my son David, if you ever hear this story and recognize yourself in it, I love you. I have always loved you. I will always love you. The mother who raised you, who sacrificed for you, who celebrated every milestone in your life, that mother still exists. She's still here, still hoping, still waiting for you to remember who she really is. Jessica chose her lies over my years of sacrifice, and you chose to believe her. But love is patient, love endures, and a mother's love never truly dies. If you ever want to remember who we used to be to each other, if you ever want to rebuild what was torn down, I'll be here. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it helps someone out there feel less alone in their pain. And I hope it reminds all of us that love should never be called manipulation, that closeness should never be called dysfunction, and that the bonds between parents and children are sacred things that should be protected, not destroyed. Remember, relationships built on truth and love may bend, but they don't break. Relationships built on lies and manipulation, no matter how successful they seem, carry the seeds of their own destruction. Time has a way of revealing what's real and what's false. I still believe that love wins in the end. I have to believe that. It's all I have left.